Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number LB4310-400-640. This is a single-acting spring hinge. And the LB4310, as I pull it out here, tells us everything about the hinge and how it's different from all of the other LB series hinges from Bommer. Here's what it looks like. This is an LB4310-400-640. Let's dissect the part number. LB stands for lube bearing. It's a three-knuckle type of high-quality pin construction, barrel construction, hinge construction, used on their single-acting spring hinges, or on most of their single-acting, but not all of their single-acting spring hinges. Lube bearing. It's what a spring hinge is when it has what they call self-lubricated bearings. Okay. The 4310 is a reference to, and that number conspires to tell you the thickness of the leaf, the location of the holes, and the fact that the leaves are equal, and the treatment to the corner. In this case, square. This is a 4310, so that means that the leaf thickness is about 97 thousandths. Let's take a look. There's a link below this video to a document called Template, and it will show you the leaf thickness. It's 96 thousandths. Square corner. This is called a template pattern. When you click on the link below this video to the document called Template, that word is used differently than referring to the location of these screw holes, meaning if you ordered a 4-inch hinge and the hole locations were template from manufacturer A compared to manufacturers B, C, D, all the way to Z, the locations are going to be in the same place for these holes. It's the template pattern. As the 4310 part number changes, so does everything governing the hinge in terms of leaf thickness, the overall width, the corner treatment. Okay, this is indeed a full mortise, so be mindful of that. If you are looking for a spring hinge, Bommer has lots of them to choose from because your application will change, meaning you'll have an application that will dictate a different spring hinge. There is a link below this video to another video, how to determine the appropriate spring hinge. That will be helpful in allowing you to find what you need. Okay, now that template also tells us that it shows us this is a full mortise hinge. You can see from the swag, this corner right where my ring fingers are, right here, that when the leaves are brought parallel, they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame, giving you that small margin between there, which they've got at 0.062 inch. Okay. If you are replacing a hinge and you're not sure if this is right, review the template. Make sure the location of everything and the dimensional properties match what you need. If not, reach out to us and we'll help you. 400 on the part number. That means that this hinge is 4-inch tall and 4-inch wide. It absolutely means that the height is the first dimension. It's not 4-inch by 4-inch. It's always 4-inch by 4-inch. Why? Well, it doesn't matter when you have a square hinge like this. But imagine if I sold you a hinge that was 4.5 by 4 or 5 by 8. It's really helpful to know, the first dimension is the height. And that's why we're particular about understanding the height is the first dimension. The 640 in the part number, that means two things. It means it's made of steel. That's number one. And that it means that it is oil-rubbed bronze. Okay. This is a UL-listed single-acting spring hinge. Let's move on to the next document to look at. Let's go to Certifications and Hinge Selection Guide. Now, that document tells us that this is a UL-listed hinge. If you have a fire-rated door, you're going to want a UL-listed hinge. That is grade 1, which means it's been tested and successfully passed 1 million cycles. Who knows how far it got? I don't. But it got to at least 1 million. In a residential application, that can be a lifetime. That could be several lifetimes, I suppose, of using the front door, well, not the front door, but probably the garage door of your home. That attached garage door in many jurisdictions are fire rated. The frame may not be, but the door needs to be. So that's where you will probably use this. Uses for single acting spring hinge: minimizes the cost of installing a door closing device on industrial, commercial, institutional, and residential applications. Used to convert doors to self-closing in existing buildings. For use in hotels, motels, apartments, dormitories, residences, etc., where doors are required to be self-closing. Always verify local fire code requirements. So, sure, it is less expensive overall to install spring hinges. That's no question. You could spend the same amount of money on spring hinges as you could on a door closer, and you won't spend the labor on the door closer installation. But inferring any advantage of spring hinges beyond cost is not a direct relationship, meaning they're not equal. And in my opinion, a door closer, hydraulic control, and the word is control, you're controlling the door, is superior to a spring hinge, which just stores energy, storage energy, more energy, release, bam. That's not control. That's just a spring. It does the job, but not as elegantly as a door closer, and I think we need to be honest about that. Moving on. Labeled doors. NFPA 80, the code governing fire-rated doors, certainly. Minimum of 2 spring hinges on a fire-rated door for up to and including 3 hour. That would be a metal door. 90-minute if it was a wood door. Wind conditions state that you may require more than just 2 spring hinges if it's something where you have an environmental situation to deal with. UL listed spring hinges are not available as a reverse spring. There are those springs that will open the door when you release them. From the closed position, you unlatch it, the door will actually open. Sometimes you want a door to always be in the open position other than when it's closed. I could think of a sales manager's office. That door would always be open. Employees can always approach the sales manager. But when the door is closed, that means it's been specifically closed. And, timeout. 3070 is the maximum labeled door size for these hinges. Non-labeled doors can go to 4 foot wide and 7'6" in height, and you're going to throw additional spring hinges into the mix at that point. The bottom of that page tells us how many hinges to use based on the weight of the door and the size of the hinge. Generally, 2 hinges are going to work. There's no question. If your door is heavier, like in this 4-inch column, good to 110, use all spring hinges, or at least 3. Okay? So that chart will help you determine, and we'll talk about more spring hinges rather than less in a moment. Be mindful that you cannot take this residential weight hinge, which is 96 thousandths, and mix and match it with a standard weight hinge, which on a 4-inch would be 130 thousandths. You have to have all the same leaf thickness or within a tolerance of about 10% plus or minus for it to compatibly work. So if you are doing a door and you have 2 spring hinges, you got to make sure that that other hinge is, first of all, installed at the top of the opening, ball bearing, but within that 10% plus or minus range of the thickness. Why at the top? Well, the top of the door carries 70% of the door's weight and does the majority of the job just hanging the door. Ball bearing, because that's a far superior hinge when it comes to the door's weight hanging on the knuckle assembly and those bearings being able to actually permit the door to swing freer and with less friction, naturally. Now, moving on to the installation instructions. Very simple and straightforward. Basically, hang the door. Just get the door hung. If you're using 1 spring hinge, I'd probably put it in the middle. If you're using 2, middle and bottom. If you're using 3, all of them get spring hinges. And if you've got a door that's 7'6", you would technically have 4 hinges on there. The top hinge location is, as I just said, the last place where you're going to want to put a spring hinge. Do not, caution, top of the installation instructions, do not exceed 3 holes if that door is going to 180 degree. Do not exceed 4 holes if you're going to 90 degree. And those holes I'm going to discuss right now. Get the door hung, you're ready to roll. Now, it's time to start setting the tension. For every order that you place, you will get a tension rod, just a piece of black steel. For every hinge that you order, you're going to get a tension pin. This client's order has 2 hinges on it, so he gets 2 tension pins. These hinges are non-handed. They can be installed any way you like. They can work on left-hand doors. They can work on right-hand doors. Okay, doesn't matter. For purposes of the installation demonstration, when the tension collar, this collar that's here with the holes in it, and you see there's not one down here, when you insert the tension rod into one of the holes and turn it clockwise, you reveal new additional holes. It's into one of those new holes that you will then drop the tension pin, and that's how you set tension onto the spring. Doors in the closed position, set some tension, middle and bottom hinge. Do that first, maybe in the top if you've got it there. Put a couple of holes of tension on each, 2. Start to test the door. Increase, decrease as appropriate. You want the door to be closed and latched. If you have a fire-rated door, your obligation are twofold. The door must be self-closing, and it must be self-latching. Your hinge has to get the door not only closed, but also latched. It is important that the hinge tension pin is inserted flush into the hinge completely. I've actually had lawyers call me, and I've had a lawyer call me and say, "What can you tell me about the tension pin?" Turns out in a fitting room scenario, a child put their back up against the hinge and then started to slide down the door like a child would just be a child and hurt themselves. Turns out the installer did not use the factory tension pin, and it was projecting substantially. You want that tension pin to be out of the way. A cardinal rule that I've kind of come to realize in this industry is projecting hardware is always a potential for damage. A hinge that's too wide, a door closer that's not installed in the most elegant location, a tension pin sticking out of the edge of a spring hinge. This is all potential dangers to the user. So that's literally mentioned there. Okay. Now we talked. I said I was going to speak more about more hinges rather than less, being spring hinges. Now, be mindful that spring hinges are actually not load rated, so you don't want to use them unnecessarily. You will want to use ball bearing hinges in place of those locations that require hinges. Always at the top. However, having more spring hinges in a scenario that you're not sure if 2 or 3 will work, go to the next one, because if you have environmental conditions such as the front door of a condo building, a 3-flat building in Chicago, northwest side of the city, there are 3 flat buildings everywhere. You've got the front door of the building, it's got an intercom, it has an electric strike. In the summertime, the windows are open. The air pressure is less, and that door will just either not close or slam closed, however the ambient conditions are. Having more spring hinges allows the owner to be able to tailor what's happening on that door more completely, because you have a greater potential of stored energy in the spring because you have more springs. I liken more spring hinges to a tugboat. They don't go very fast, but they can pull a lot of weight. And you want the door to obviously close, but again, latch. Whether it's a 3-flat with an intercom, and it's an entrance where you don't want anyone just walking in, or it's a fire-rated door. So having the ability to set that tension so that in the last few degree of the closing cycle, where the stored energy is the least in the spring hinges, you still have enough torque to be able to get it to close. Okay? You don't want to set the spring tension so high that you're literally just slamming the door. You've got inertia, and the door is just getting closed because you've got the door moving quick enough. Oftentimes what will happen is the door won't reliably latch. It'll slam and bounce back open, and you're going to have damage to the door, to the frame, to the stop that's on the frame, to the wall prematurely. You don't want any of that. A fire-rated wood door that's been slammed thousands of times will begin to fatigue. There's no question. Obviously compromising the integrity of the fire rating of the door. Now, having said that, I prefer more spring hinges, certainly when you're on the borderline of more, not because I'm a spring hinge salesman, but you do need the door to close. And plus, I'm more of a fan of hydraulic door closers. This hinge is available in lots of different colors, every color that you want, your brasses, your bronze, your chromes, prime coat, bright black Japan. You can do zinc coated as well. It's made of steel, so you'll be able to do any of that stuff. Anything that a steel hinge can be done with. And then finally, actually I got a little ahead of myself. The last thing I'd like to show you you've got your UL certification on there. That's important to know for the inspector to verify that what you've installed is UL listed. You also have the Bommer logo, which says right above it, Made in USA, a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. Finally, if you have any questions on the Bommer LB4310-400-640 spring hinge or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.